Go ahead, Lily. If you're so desperate for love, why don't you marry that beggar outside? My sister laughed, throwing my bridesmaid bouquet at a man in dusty clothes standing by the door. My ex-fiancé, Alexander Montgomery's top executive, sneered beside her. A poor nurse and a street sweeper. A match made in heaven, he mocked. I looked at the man Alexander, though I didn't know his name then. His eyes were kind, unlike the sharks in this room. Will you marry me? I whispered to the stranger. To my shock, he smiled and took my hand.
I've been waiting for a woman like you for a lifetime.
Tell me which city you're watching from. Your messages always make my day. And if you're not subscribed yet, join us. There's so much more coming. Now let's continue. Let me tell you how I got here. Standing in my own engagement party, proposing to a homeless stranger while my family watched in horror. 3 months earlier, I was supposed to marry Richard Miller, a rising executive at Montgomery Group. My parents arranged it over dinner at an expensive restaurant I couldn't afford. They said it would secure our family's future, elevate our status in society. Richard was handsome, successful, ambitious, everything they valued. Except he didn't love me and I didn't love him. But love wasn't part of the arrangement. My parents made that abundantly clear. Marriage is a business transaction, Lily, my father had said while cutting his steak. Love is a luxury for people who can afford to be foolish. Richard Miller is going places. You should be grateful he's willing to overlook your mediocre career. Mediocre career. That's what he called 12 years of saving lives as an emergency room nurse. 12 years of holding patients' hands while they died, performing CPR until my arms screamed. I tried to make it work because that's what good daughters do. I smiled at dinner parties, nodded when my mother discussed wedding venues, pretended I didn't notice how Richard's eyes followed my younger sister Victoria everywhere. She was the beautiful one, the charming one. I was just Lily Carter, the responsible one. The nurse who worked night shifts at Presbyterian Hospital. The daughter who paid her own way through nursing school while Victoria got a trust fund. The one who was grateful to be chosen by Richard Miller. 2 weeks before the wedding, I came home early from a double shift. I was exhausted, still in my scrubs, smelling like antiseptic and coffee. I found them in my apartment, Richard and Victoria, tangled together on my couch. The couch I'd bought with my first paycheck. Victoria saw me first. She didn't even look sorry. She looked triumphant, like she'd won some competition I didn't know we were having. Richard at least had the decency to look embarrassed, scrambling for his shirt. I should have screamed, thrown things, collapsed in tears. Instead, I felt numb, like watching a movie about someone else's life. I'm sorry, Lily, Richard said. But Victoria and we have something real. You deserve someone who loves you the way I love her. The way he loved her. As if betrayal could be wrapped in kindness and handed to me like a gift, I told them to leave. Victoria kissed Richard in my doorway, making sure I saw, making sure I knew she'd won. My mother's reaction was worse than the betrayal itself. When I told her I was calling off the wedding, she slapped me. Actually slapped me across the face in our family sitting room. How dare you embarrass this family, she hissed. Do you know how many people we've invited? How much money we've spent? You will marry Richard Miller, or you will marry no one. But he's in love with Victoria, I said quietly. Then you should have tried harder to keep him, my mother replied. My father stood by the window, silent as always, letting her speak for both of them. I realized then that I'd never really had a family. I'd had people who shared my DNA but didn't know me at all. The wedding proceeded anyway. My parents announced that Richard and Victoria had fallen in love and would be marrying instead. They framed it as a romantic twist, true love prevailing, as if I was just a minor character in someone else's story. They still expected me to attend as Victoria's maid of honor, to stand beside her in a bridesmaid dress and smile while she married the man who'd proposed to me 3 months earlier. I should have refused. I should have walked away, started fresh somewhere else. But part of me wanted to see it, wanted to witness the spectacle of my family's cruelty, wanted to remember exactly why I needed to leave them behind forever. So I showed up to the country club in a cheap bridesmaid dress I'd bought myself. The ceremony was beautiful in that manufactured way wealthy people create. String quartet, ice sculptures, champagne fountains, 200 guests who didn't care about love, only about being seen. I stood at the altar watching my sister marry my ex-fiancé and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just a hollow space where my heart used to be. The reception was when everything changed. Victoria was drunk on champagne and victory, holding court like a queen. Richard looked uncomfortable, probably realizing what he'd actually signed up for. My mother was showing off her successful daughter, the one who'd landed the executive. My father was networking, always networking. And I was invisible until Victoria decided she wanted one more moment of cruelty. She spotted a man standing near the service entrance. Someone in dusty work clothes who'd probably been hired for setup. She grabbed my bouquet from my hands, the bridesmaid flowers I'd been holding like a punishment. "Go ahead, Lily. If you're so desperate for love, why don't you marry that beggar outside?" She threw the bouquet at him, and the entire room erupted in laughter. Richard joined in, sneering about nurses and street sweepers. My mother looked away, pretending I didn't exist. And the man just stood there, taking their cruelty with quiet dignity. But when I looked at him, really looked, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Kindness in his eyes. Not pity, not judgment, just a deep well of understanding. Like he knew exactly what it felt like to be mocked by people who thought themselves superior. In that moment, I made the craziest decision of my life. I walked across that country club reception hall, every eye on me. I stopped in front of the stranger with dusty clothes and worn shoes. "Will you marry me?" I whispered. The room went silent. Victoria's champagne glass shattered on the floor. My mother gasped like I'd committed murder. The man studied my face for a long moment. Then he smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. "I've been waiting for a woman like you for a lifetime." He took my hand, his grip warm and steady, and we walked out of that country club together while my family screamed behind us. His name was Alexander, he told me as we stood on the sidewalk. Just Alexander. He didn't offer a last name and I didn't ask. Something about the way he said it made me understand this was intentional, this withholding of identity. We took the subway to my apartment because I'd sold my car to pay for nursing supplies. He sat beside me in his dusty clothes. I sat beside him in my bridesmaid dress. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The silence between us was comfortable, understanding, like we'd known each other for years instead of minutes. I took him home to my tiny studio in Queens. One room serving as bedroom, living room, and kitchen all at once. A bathroom so small you could barely turn around. Furniture from thrift stores, hand-me-downs from colleagues, things I'd salvaged from curbsides and restored myself. It was all I could afford on a nurse's salary after rent, student loans, and basic survival. But it was mine. I'd built this life myself without my family's money, without their approval, without their constant judgment. And sitting there with Alexander, I felt proud of it for the first time. I gave him clean clothes, old sweats from an ex-boyfriend I'd kept meaning to throw away. They fit Alexander perfectly, settling on his shoulders like they'd been made for him. Better than they'd ever fit anyone else. I made scrambled eggs and toast because it was all I had after working 70 hours that week. No groceries, no energy to shop, just basics. We sat on my second-hand couch that sagged in the middle. We ate in comfortable silence while sirens wailed outside and my neighbors argued through thin walls. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice rough like he wasn't used to gratitude. "For what?" I asked, genuinely confused. "For seeing me," he replied simply. "Not many people do. Most people look right through people like me. Through the dusty clothes and worn shoes to nothing. You looked at my eyes instead." I understood exactly what he meant. I'd spent my entire life being invisible to my family. Being seen is everything. We talked until sunrise, about everything and nothing and all the spaces between. He told me about traveling, about watching people from the outside, about learning who they really were when they thought no one important was looking. The masks people wore, the cruelty they inflicted when they believed there would be no consequences. I told him about nursing, about holding dying patients' hands, about the emergency room at 3 a.m. when humanity showed its rawest self, about feeling invisible in my own family, about always being compared to Victoria and found lacking. He never mentioned where he came from or where he was going. I never asked. It felt like we existed in a bubble outside normal time, outside the rules that governed everyone else. When the sun came up painting my studio apartment gold, I went to work at the hospital. I left him my spare key on the counter. $40 in cash for food, everything I had until next payday. A note scrawled on a sticky note that said simply, "Make yourself at home." When I came home 12 hours later, exhausted from an shift that had been nonstop trauma, my apartment was transformed, not in a flashy way or anything expensive. Just clean in a way it hadn't been in months. The dishes were done, dried, put away in the correct cabinets. Laundry folded with precision, hospital corners on my bed, floors swept and mopped. Dinner waiting on the stove, pasta with vegetables from the corner market, nothing fancy but made with care you could taste. Alexander looked almost shy when I walked in. "I wanted to contribute," he explained. "You gave me shelter and kindness. This is all I can offer in return." I wanted to cry. Richard had lived with me for 6 months and never once cleaned anything. This man I'd known for a day had scrubbed my floors. We fell into a routine over the next 3 weeks. I worked double shifts to keep the lights on, sometimes 16 hours straight in the emergency room. Presbyterian was chronically understaffed, constantly asking nurses to cover extra shifts. I said yes every time because I needed the money. Because I was building a life without my family's wealth. Because I had someone depending on me now. Alexander kept the apartment running like a well-oiled machine. Every surface clean, every chore done, meals ready when I stumbled home exhausted. But it was more than just domestic help. He fixed the leaky faucet my landlord had ignored for 8 months, using tools borrowed from a neighbor. He patched the cracked window with materials from the hardware store, carefully applying caulk until no draft came through. He somehow stretched my $70 weekly grocery budget into meals that actually tasted good, shopping sales and discount stores with strategic precision. He made my studio apartment feel like a home for the first time since I'd moved in 3 years ago. At night when I got home, we talked about real things, not small talk or weather or surface pleasantries. Real, deep, honest conversation about life and dreams and pain. He told me about his mother who died when he was 22, how she'd taught him that character mattered more than money, how she'd worked as a teacher despite coming from wealth, believing in contributing to the world instead of just consuming from it. I told him about my dream that kept me going through endless shifts. Opening a community clinic for people who fell through cracks of expensive healthcare systems. People who worked 3 jobs but couldn't afford insurance. People who delayed treatment until emergencies became life-threatening. People who chose between medication and rent every single month. I wanted to build something that said healthcare is a human right, not a luxury for the wealthy. "You'll do it someday," Alexander said with absolute conviction. "You have the heart for it, the determination, the skills. Money is just logistics." No one had ever believed in my dream before. My parents had called it naive and impractical. Richard had called it a waste of my nursing degree. But Alexander listened like my dream was not only valid, but inevitable. Like he could see the future where I'd achieved it. One evening, about 2 weeks in, I came home to find him on the fire escape. Not doing anything specific, just sitting there watching the city. I joined him with 2 mugs of tea, sitting close in the small space. "What are you thinking about?" I asked. He was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with something internal. "About how strange life is," he said finally. "How you can spend years searching for something and find it unexpectedly." "What were you searching for?" I asked. "Someone who sees people instead of roles," he replied. "Who judges character instead of credentials. Who chooses kindness even when cruelty would be easier. Someone real in a world full of performances." He looked at me then, and something in his expression made my breath catch. "Someone exactly like you, Lily." I should have pressed him then. Should have asked what he meant, who he really was, what he wasn't telling me. But I didn't want to break whatever was forming between us. This fragile, beautiful thing that felt more real than anything I'd experienced. So I just held his hand while sirens wailed below and the city hummed around us. 2 people in a tiny apartment, building something neither of us fully understood yet. The next morning I had to work a double shift starting at 6 a.m. I woke up to find Alexander already in the kitchen, making actual breakfast instead of just toast. Scrambled eggs, yes, but also fruit he'd somehow afforded. Coffee brewed perfectly, even a note scribbled on a napkin. "You're going to save lives today. Don't forget to save some energy for yourself too. Come home safe." It was such a small thing, but it made me cry standing there in my scrubs because no one had ever told me to come home safe before. That shift was brutal. A multi-car accident brought in 6 patients simultaneously, 2 of them coding, everyone screaming. I did CPR for 40 minutes straight on a teenage girl while her mother watched through glass, praying. We got her back. Barely, but we got her back. When I finally stumbled out of the A at 11 p.m., 17 hours after I'd arrived, I was covered in other people's blood. So tired I could barely stand. I came home to find Alexander waiting up, even though it was late. He'd saved dinner, reheated it perfectly. He didn't ask me to talk about my day. He just sat with me while I ate in silence, processing trauma my brain wasn't ready to verbalize. Then he did something that broke me completely. He knelt in front of me, took off my shoes one at a time, and just held my feet in his hands like they were something precious. "You're a miracle," he said quietly. "You save lives every day and come home like it's nothing. Like you're not a hero. But you are, Lily. You're the most extraordinary person I've ever met." I started crying then, not sad tears but release. Someone saw me, really saw me. Not the disappointing daughter or the mediocre nurse or the woman who wasn't enough. Just me, Lily, doing my best. Being seen like that changes you. 3 weeks after we met, I came home to find him in those same dusty clothes from the first day. I'd washed them a dozen times, but they were worn thin. "Tomorrow," I announced, "we're going shopping." "Lily, I can't let you spend money on me," he protested immediately. "Too late," I interrupted. "I already set aside the money. We're getting you a decent suit. Something you can wear if you want to look for work." He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You do that?" he asked quietly. "Spend your savings on someone you barely know?" "You're not a stranger anymore," I replied. "You're my husband, even if it's only on paper. Even if the whole world thinks I'm crazy. You're mine, Alexander. And I take care of what's mine." The next day was my day off. We went to a discount suit shop in Brooklyn. Alexander tried on a charcoal gray suit that transformed him completely. The fabric was nothing special, probably synthetic blend, but the way he wore it was extraordinary. Straight shoulders, confident posture. Like he'd been born in expensive clothes. "How do I look?" he asked, studying himself in the mirror. "Like someone who owns the world," I replied honestly. He smiled then, sad and beautiful. Like I'd said something that hurt and healed simultaneously. We bought the suit with my credit card. $347, almost a full week's paycheck. Worth every penny to see him look at himself with something like hope. That evening we walked through Central Park, hand in hand like a real couple. Alexander stopped suddenly near Bethesda Fountain. "Lily," he said, "there's something I need to tell you." My heart hammered. This was it, the moment he'd reveal whatever secret he'd been keeping. Maybe he was married. Maybe he was wanted by police. Maybe he was dying. But before he could continue, my phone rang. Victoria. I almost didn't answer. Something made me pick up. "Hello, Victoria," I said coolly. Her voice was poisoned through the speaker. "I hope you're happy with your beggar," she spat. "Because you're officially uninvited from my engagement party next month. I don't want your embarrassment infecting my special day." I felt Alexander's hand tighten on mine. "That's fine," I replied calmly. "I have better things to do than watch you celebrate stealing my life." Victoria laughed, cruel and sharp. "Oh, Lily, you have no idea what's coming. Richard's friend just became the new director at Presbyterian Hospital. He's very interested in hearing about nurses with unprofessional personal lives." She hung up. I stood there while the sun set over Central Park, feeling my world tilt dangerously. Alexander pulled me close. "They can't touch what we've built," he whispered. I wanted to believe him. But I knew my family. They wouldn't stop until they destroyed everything I dared to build without their permission. The suspension letter arrived 3 days later. Presbyterian Hospital, official letterhead with the hospital logo I'd looked at with pride for 12 years. Effective immediately, I was suspended pending investigation. Translation typed in bureaucratic language. Richard's friend, the new director, had made good on Victoria's threat. 12 years of perfect nursing record, commendations from patients and supervisors, destroyed with one vindictive phone call from my sister's new husband. I sat on my couch staring at the letter until the words blurred, reading it over and over like maybe the words would change if I blinked enough times. My hands were shaking. My chest felt hollow. Everything I'd worked for, every sacrifice I'd made to build a life independent of my family, gone. They'd found a way to destroy me even after I'd walked away. Especially after I'd walked away, that was the lesson. You don't leave the Carter family. They leave you with nothing. Alexander found me there an hour later. I'd been crying so hard I couldn't breathe properly, my face swollen, my scrubs still on because I hadn't had the energy to change. He knelt in front of me without a word, took the letter from my shaking hands with gentle fingers. Read it in silence, his expression darkening with each line. Then he did something completely unexpected that changed everything I thought I knew. He pulled out his phone, a phone that looked far too expensive for someone in dusty clothes, and made a call that shattered my entire reality. "Yes, this is Alexander Montgomery," he said quietly into the phone. His voice had changed completely. No longer the gentle man who cooked dinner. This was the voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed immediately. "I need to speak with the board chair of Presbyterian Hospital. Tell them it's urgent and non-negotiable. Transfer me now." I stared at him with my mouth open. Alexander Montgomery. The Alexander Montgomery. The billionaire CEO whose name was on half of Manhattan's buildings, whose company employed thousands, whose wealth was measured in billions, not millions. The man whose penthouse I'd walked past 100 times on my way to work, looking up at those top floor lights, and wondering what it was like to have that kind of power. That Alexander Montgomery was sitting in my studio apartment wearing borrowed sweatpants. Before I could process this information, before I could even form words, he put the phone on speaker. A woman's voice came through, sharp and professional and slightly out of breath like she'd run to take the call. "Mr. Montgomery, I wasn't expecting your call today. How can the board assist you?" "This is Linda Westbrook speaking, board chair." I recognized her name. She'd given the keynote at our nursing conference last year. "You have a nurse named Lily Carter," Alexander said. His voice had changed completely, no longer gentle, but commanding. "She's been suspended on false charges coordinated by my former executive Richard Miller. I want the suspension lifted immediately and a formal apology issued." There was a pause. "Sir, we have protocols even for board members." "You have protocols," Alexander agreed. "I have $3 billion in hospital donations that can be redirected." "Your choice." The line went dead. I couldn't breathe. "Alexander?" I whispered. "As in Montgomery Group? As in the company that owns half of New York?" He finally looked at me with guilt and hope and fear mixed together. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have told you sooner. But I needed to know if you'd love me for me, not for the Montgomery name or money or power. Just for the man I am when everything else is stripped away." I stood up, paced to the window overlooking Queens. "You lied to me," I said. "For 3 weeks you let me believe you were homeless." "I didn't lie," Alexander said carefully. "I never claimed to be homeless. I just didn't correct your assumptions. That's the same thing." I shouted. "Is it?" he asked. Because from where I'm standing, you're the first person in 10 years who's seen me as human, not a bank account or business opportunity or trophy. And yes, I should have told you sooner, but I was terrified. My phone rang. Presbyterian Hospital. Ms. Carter, Director Williams speaking. Your suspension has been lifted effective immediately. We sincerely apologize for this situation. Please report Monday morning. The line went dead. I looked at Alexander, at this man who'd scrubbed my floors and cooked my meals and held me when I cried, who was apparently powerful enough to end careers with one phone call. I don't know how to feel, I admitted. Neither do I, he replied honestly. But everything I told you about who I am is true. The money doesn't change that. I'm still the man who thinks your scrambled eggs are the best meal. Despite everything, I laughed. It came out half sob. You're insane, I told him. Probably, he agreed. But I'm your husband, even if it started as escape. I'm yours, Lily, if you'll still have me. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to throw him out and protect myself from inevitable heartbreak. But I looked at him, really looked, and saw the same kind eyes from that first day. The same man who'd listened to my dreams like they mattered. The only difference was now I knew his last name. Okay, I said finally. Okay, I'm still processing. Okay, I'm probably going to be mad for a while. And okay, you're still my husband. No more secrets, I added. Starting now. He nodded. No more secrets, he agreed. Starting with this, Victoria's engagement party next month. She just sent you a new invitation this morning. Hand delivered to the building. I blinked. I thought I was uninvited. You were, Alexander said. When she thought you'd be embarrassed to show up. Now that she knows who you married, suddenly you're guest of honor. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering. Mr. and Mrs. Alexander Montgomery. Request the honor of your presence at the Hamilton estate. Black tie required. I felt sick. She wants to show me off like some trophy, I realized. Like she won by humiliating me and I won by accident. Yes, Alexander said. But she doesn't know I sent her something special. A dress from my mother's private collection. Vintage Givenchy. Never photographed. Never catalogued. I sent it to you last week. You assumed it was another one of Victoria's cruel jokes. But it's real and priceless, and when Victoria sees you wearing it, she tries to humiliate you by claiming it's fake. And when she does, I asked. When she does, he replied, I drop the mask. I tell everyone exactly who I am. The beggar, she mocked. The man who owns the company that employs her husband. The CEO who's about to show your family exactly who they threw away. This isn't about revenge, Lily. This is about them understanding the magnitude of their mistake. I should have said no. Should have refused to play their games. But part of me wanted to see it. Wanted to watch Victoria's face when she realized the beggar she'd mocked controlled her entire future. Okay, I said quietly, let's go to the party. But Alexander, promise me something. After this, we leave them behind completely. We build our life away from their toxicity. Deal? He took my hand, pressed it to his chest where I could feel his heartbeat. Deal, he whispered. After this, we start fresh. No masks, no disguises, no games. Just us building something real. The dress arrived in a vintage box with a handwritten note. For the woman who saw past dusty clothes to the man underneath. Wear this and let them see what I've always seen. Your loving husband, Alexander. The gown was breathtaking. Champagne silk that caught light like liquid gold. Hand-stitched pearls forming constellations across the bodice. A hemline that whispered against hardwood floors. It fit me perfectly, like it had been made for my body. This was your mother's. I breathed. Alexander nodded. She wore it once, the night my father proposed. She said it was her lucky dress, helped her see past his last name to the man underneath. I wanted you to have it. I tried it on in my bedroom. The woman in the mirror didn't look like Lily Carter, overworked nurse from Queens. She looked like someone who belonged in ballrooms, someone who could stand beside a billionaire CEO without flinching. You're beautiful, Alexander said from the doorway. But you were beautiful in scrubs too. The dress doesn't change who you are. It just shows everyone else what I've known from the beginning. The Hamilton estate was everything I expected. Massive stone manor, 20 acres, valet parking for cars that cost more than my annual salary. String quartet in the garden, champagne fountains, ice sculptures. My family's wealth on full display. Alexander and I arrived in his car, a modest sedan he'd been driving to maintain his disguise. The valet looked confused between Bentleys and Maseratis. Alexander tipped him $200. The kid's eyes went wide. We walked up stone steps hand in hand. I felt eyes on us immediately, whispers spreading like wildfire. That's her, the one who married the beggar. Did you hear Montgomery sent a car? Maybe he felt sorry for her marrying down so spectacularly. Alexander squeezed my hand. Steady, he murmured. Let them think what they want for another hour. Then we'll show them who really married down. The grand ballroom stole my breath. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens. 200 guests in designer gowns and tuxedos, all turning to stare as we entered. My mother saw us first. Her face went white, then red, then carefully neutral. Lily, she said coldly, how nice of you to come. And you brought your husband. She said the word like it tasted rotten. Alexander extended his hand politely. Pleasure to see you again, Mrs. Carter. My mother looked at his hand like he'd offered her garbage. Then she turned her back, a classic power move. But Alexander just smiled like he'd expected exactly this response. My father was more direct. You have nerve showing up here, he growled. After embarrassing this family with your ridiculous stunt marrying a homeless man. I opened my mouth, but Alexander spoke first, his voice quiet but carrying across the room. Lily has embarrassed no one, he said calmly. She made a choice to marry for love instead of status. I think her family would be proud of that kind of courage. My father's face turned purple. Love? She threw away a future with one of Montgomery Group's most promising executives to marry a man in borrowed clothes. Those clothes were mine, I interjected. Bought with money I earned working 60-hour weeks as a nurse while Victoria has never worked a single day. The crowd gasped. You didn't just say that, my mother hissed. Victoria appeared then, radiating smugness in a wedding white gown that probably cost $60,000. Richard followed, looking deeply uncomfortable like he wanted to be anywhere else. Lily, Victoria exclaimed with manufactured sweetness. I'm so glad you came. I wanted everyone to see how happy you are with your choice. Though I see you couldn't afford to rent him a better tuxedo. That's all right. Not everyone can shop where we do. The room tittered with cruel laughter. Alexander's expression didn't change, but I felt the shift in his posture. The beggar facade falling away. Something colder and more dangerous taking its place. This tuxedo was custom made in Milan, he said mildly. But I appreciate your concern about my wardrobe, Victoria. Her smile faltered. Custom made? Don't be ridiculous. Why would a homeless man need custom clothes? I never said I was homeless, Alexander replied. You assumed that based on my appearance. Just like you assumed throwing a bouquet at a stranger was humiliating. Instead of the greatest gift you could have given me. What's that supposed to mean? Victoria demanded. It means your cruelty led me to the love of my life, Alexander said simply. And for that, I should probably thank you. The crowd was silent now, everyone watching this drama unfold. Victoria's face was turning red. Richard touched her arm, whispering something. She shook him off violently. Love, she spat. Lily, please. You married a beggar out of spite. Don't pretend it's some great romance. We all know you'll regret it when reality sets in. Will she? Alexander asked quietly. What reality is that exactly? That she works as a nurse while I do. What did you call it, street sweeping? He looked around the ballroom at faces he clearly recognized. Montgomery Industries executives, board members of companies he owned, people who knew exactly who he was. Victoria, he continued, there's something I should tell you about this dress Lily's wearing. What about it? Victoria said, but her voice was shaking now. It's beautiful, Alexander said. Vintage Givenchy from 1963. Hand-stitched pearls. One of only 3 ever made. This particular one belonged to my mother. It's never been photographed, never cataloged, never left the Montgomery family vault, until last week when I sent it to my wife. The room had gone completely silent. You could hear champagne bubbles popping. Victoria's smile was frozen, her face draining of color. Montgomery family? She repeated weakly. You don't mean. Alexander Montgomery, he said quietly. CEO of Montgomery Group, owner of Montgomery Industries, Montgomery Real Estate, Montgomery Investments, and approximately 47 other companies, including the venture capital firm that funded your husband's previous startup. He looked at Richard. Richard had gone gray, literally gray, like all blood had left his face. Every ounce of color drained away as reality crashed down on him. Sir, Richard stammered, his voice breaking. I didn't know. I had no idea you were. I never meant. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on marble floors, the sound echoing through absolute silence. Didn't know you were mocking your former boss's wife? Alexander finished for him, his voice cold enough to freeze. Didn't know that every word you said at that wedding reception was recorded by my security team? Every insult, every laugh, every moment of cruelty captured on video. Or didn't know that I've been undercover for 6 months specifically to find someone who would love me without the name, without the money, without the power. Someone real in a world full of performances. I watched Richard process this, watched him realize his entire career had just ended. The startup he'd been so proud of, funded by Montgomery Group, the connections he'd leveraged, all through Montgomery Industries. The future he'd envisioned, all dependent on a man he'd publicly humiliated. His legs actually buckled. He grabbed the edge of a table to stay upright. Victoria grabbed his arm, but he shook her off, too consumed by his own destruction. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Gasps and murmurs spreading like wildfire through 200 guests who were rapidly recalculating every interaction. Board members looking at each other in confusion. Socialites suddenly remembering times they'd been cruel to service workers while Montgomery might have been watching. The whole room rearranging their understanding of reality. Alexander raised his hand. One simple gesture. Silence fell immediately. Absolute, total silence, like someone had hit a mute button on 200 people. He had that kind of presence, that kind of power. The kind that commanded rooms full of powerful people without raising his voice, without making threats. Just quiet certainty that he would be obeyed. I've spent my entire adult life wondering if anyone would see past the Montgomery name, he continued. His voice was steady, but I heard emotion underneath. Past the billions. Past the empire. Past the expectations and assumptions and performance. To the actual man underneath all of that. I've dated women who loved my bank account, he said. Been engaged to socialites who wanted the Montgomery name attached to theirs. Had relationships with people who saw me as a stepping stone to power or a prize to be won. But I'd never met someone who saw me as just a person. Someone worth scrambling eggs for. Someone whose feet were worth holding after a long day. Someone whose dreams were worth listening to. And then Victoria threw a bouquet at me. He said, looking directly at my sister. Called me a beggar. Mocked me in front of 200 people. Laughed at the idea that someone like Lily would choose someone like me. And gave me exactly what I'd been searching for 10 years to find. She gave me the opportunity to meet the love of my life. He turned to me then, took my hand gently. The contrast was striking. His voice had been cold addressing the room, but when he looked at me, it softened completely. Lily saw a man in dusty clothes and saw kindness instead of status. She worked double shifts at a hospital to feed someone she thought was homeless. Spent her savings, money she needed for rent and groceries, to buy me decent clothes so I could walk with dignity. Defended me against her own family who mocked and judged. She married me knowing I could offer her nothing but myself. She took me to her tiny apartment, he continued, gave me her spare key. Left me money for food. Trusted a stranger because she saw something worth trusting. She talked to me about her dreams like they mattered. About opening a community clinic. About helping people who fall through cracks of expensive health care. About making the world better one patient at a time. She believed I was homeless, and she still treated me with more respect and care than most people have shown me when they knew I was a billionaire. That's real love, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. Not the transactional relationships that fill this room. Not the status marriages that value portfolios over personalities. Not the arrangements where people are evaluated like investments. Real, authentic, unconditional love. The kind that sees past appearances to character. The kind that chooses kindness even when cruelty would be easier. The kind that most people in this room will never experience. Because they're too busy measuring worth in dollars. Victoria's face had gone from white to red to a sick greenish color. She looked like she might actually vomit on her $60,000 gown. She looked at Richard, who was still clinging to the table, his career in ruins. Then back at Alexander. Then at me in the priceless dress she'd assumed was a knockoff. The dress she'd planned to publicly shame me for wearing. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. You wanted to humiliate Lily tonight, Alexander said, turning his attention fully to Victoria. Wanted her to feel small in this grand ballroom surrounded by wealth she supposedly couldn't access. Wanted to parade her around like evidence of her failure, proof that you'd won some imaginary competition. But Victoria, you made a critical, catastrophic error. You forgot that Lily is married to me now. He gestured around the ballroom. Every person in this room, every business leader, every socialite, every power player. They either work for me directly, report to companies I own, or need my investment, my approval, my support. Your father's business? Montgomery Group is the primary shareholder. Your mother's charity? Funded largely through Montgomery Foundation grants. This estate we're standing in? Owned by Montgomery Real Estate. Your fiancé's job? Funded by my venture capital firm. And the woman you tried to destroy? Alexander continued. The nurse you've spent years making feel inadequate? She's about to become the most powerful person in your entire world. Because I don't just love Lily. I respect her. I admire her. I'm in awe of her every single day. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure she has every resource, every opportunity, every advantage to achieve her dreams. Starting tonight. He pulled out his phone, made a call on speaker. Yes, Mr. Montgomery. A voice answered instantly. Transfer controlling interest of the Hamilton estate to my wife, Alexander said calmly, effective immediately. There was a pause. The Hamilton estate, sir? Where we're currently standing. Yes, Alexander confirmed. All 20 acres. The manor, the grounds, everything. Mrs. Montgomery is now the owner. Consider it a wedding gift. Victoria's scream was inhuman, raw and desperate. You can't do that. This is my engagement party. My venue, it was never yours, Alexander interrupted. Your parents rented it for the evening from Montgomery Real Estate, which I own. And as of 30 seconds ago, my wife owns. He looked at me with gentle eyes. Lily, as the new owner of this property, you have the right to determine who's welcome here. I understood immediately. This was my choice, my moment. I could throw them out, humiliate them exactly as they'd humiliated me. Watch them dragged from the premises by security. It would be satisfying, would be justice, but it wouldn't be me. I looked at Victoria, at my parents, at Richard, at 200 guests holding their breath. The party can continue, I said quietly. I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in building a life with my husband, away from people who measure worth by bank accounts instead of character. I took Alexander's hand, squeezed it. Let's go home, I said. He smiled, that real smile that had made me propose to a stranger. Best idea I've heard all night, he replied. We walked out of the ballroom hand in hand. Behind us chaos erupted. Victoria screaming, my mother demanding explanations, Richard trying to process losing his job. But I didn't look back. I kept my eyes forward on the man beside me. The man who'd worn borrowed clothes and scrubbed my floors. The man who also happened to own half of Manhattan. But mostly the man who loved me for me. We didn't go back to my tiny apartment. Alexander took me to his penthouse. 57th floor overlooking Central Park. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Furniture worth more than my life savings. But he led me straight to the kitchen where he made scrambled eggs and toast, just like that first morning. This is home, he said as we ate on his $1 million couch. Not the address or square footage. You're my home, Lily. You always have been. I leaned against his shoulder, exhausted from emotional whiplash. What happens now? I asked. Now we build the life we want on our terms, he replied. I thought about that, about what I actually wanted. I want to go back to nursing, I said. Presbyterian lifted my suspension, but I want to work at a community clinic, somewhere I can help people who can't afford expensive care. I'll fund it, Alexander offered immediately. We can open a clinic in any neighborhood you choose, staff it properly, equipment, everything. I pulled back to look at him. You'd do that? Lily, he said seriously, I'd do anything for you. I've been looking for a real partner for a decade. Someone who sees me as human, not a bank account. You worked double shifts to feed me when you thought I was homeless. You defended me to your family. You married me knowing I could offer nothing but myself. The least I can do is help you achieve your dreams. I kissed him then, really kissed him for the first time. Not the friendly pecks we shared in my apartment, but a real kiss full of promise and possibility and love. When we broke apart, he was smiling. Does this mean we're making this real? He asked. This marriage? This marriage was always real, I replied. From the moment you said yes. Everything else was just details. The next morning I woke up in a bedroom bigger than my entire apartment. Egyptian cotton sheets, morning light through massive windows, Alexander watching me with wonder. Good morning, Mrs. Montgomery, he said softly. Good morning, Mr. Montgomery, I replied. It felt strange, but also perfectly right, like pieces falling into place. My phone buzzed. 47 missed calls from my mother. 63 texts from Victoria. All variations of how dare you embarrass us, we're disowning you. You'll never see a penny. I blocked all their numbers without reading past the first few. Then I called Presbyterian Hospital. I'd like to give my notice, I told HR. I'm opening a community clinic, but I'd love to partner on referrals for continued care. The HR director was enthusiastic. We'd be honored to partner with you, Miss Carter. Or should I say Mrs. Montgomery? Just Lily. I corrected. Always just Lily. Alexander and I spent the next month planning. We found a building in the Bronx, a neighborhood desperately needing accessible medical care. We hired staff who believed in healthcare as a right, not a privilege. We set up sliding scale payments. No one would be turned away for inability to pay. The Montgomery Community Clinic opened 6 months after that disastrous engagement party. I worked there 4 days a week, doing what I'd always dreamed of, helping people who fell through cracks of expensive healthcare systems. Making real differences one patient at a time. Alexander ran his empire, but came home every evening. Not to the penthouse, though we kept it. To a brownstone in Brooklyn we bought together. Something that felt like us. Big enough for the family we hoped to have. Small enough to feel like home. 1 year after we met, we renewed our vows. Not in a country club with champagne fountains, but in the clinic surrounded by patients who'd become friends, staff who'd become family. Alexander wore the same tuxedo from the gala. I wore scrubs with a corsage. Because that was us, the nurse and the billionaire who found each other in the most unlikely way. Victoria sent a gift. A card reading, I hope you're happy with your choice. Inside was a photo of her and Richard at their small ceremony 3 months earlier. No media coverage, no society pages. Richard had found work at a smaller firm. Victoria had started a lifestyle blog no one read. They looked miserable in the photo. I threw the card away without a second thought. My mother called once, 6 months after the clinic opened. She'd seen news coverage about the philanthropist nurse married to a billionaire revolutionizing healthcare access. "I'm proud of you," she said stiffly. "Perhaps we could have lunch sometime." "Perhaps not," I replied gently. "You made your choice when you turned your back on me. I'm making mine now. To build a life with people who love me unconditionally." I hung up before she could respond. It should have hurt, but it didn't. I'd found my real family in Alexander. In my clinic staff, in patients whose lives we touched, in the life we built together brick by brick. 2 years after we met, I found out I was pregnant. Alexander cried when I told him. Real tears of joy and wonder and disbelief. "We're having a baby," he whispered. "A baby who'll grow up knowing love matters more than money. Character matters more than status. That how you treat people when no one important is watching defines who you really are." Our daughter was born on a Tuesday. Bright-eyed, beautiful, perfect. We named her Grace after Alexander's mother, the woman who taught him to value people over possessions. She wore the vintage Givenchy gown at her christening. The same dress I'd worn to that fateful engagement party. Victoria sent an expensive teddy bear from a luxury store. I donated it to the clinic's pediatric unit where a little girl whose family couldn't afford toys loved it. That felt right, turning Victoria's status signaling into joy for someone who needed it. On our 5th anniversary, Alexander and I stood on the brownstone balcony. Grace was asleep inside. The clinic was thriving. His companies were successful. We'd built something beautiful together. "Remember when you proposed to a beggar?" he asked with a smile. "Best decision I ever made," I replied. "Even knowing what you know now?" he pressed. "About the money, the companies, the empire." "Especially knowing what I know now," I said. "Because I know that under all that, you're still the man who ate scrambled eggs like they were 5-star cuisine. Who scrubbed my floors without being asked. Who listened to my dreams like they mattered. The money didn't change that. It just gave us resources to help more people." He pulled me close. "I love you, Lily Montgomery. I love you, Alexander Montgomery." And I meant it with every fiber of my being. Not because he was a billionaire. Not because he'd saved me from my toxic family. But because he was mine. The man who'd said yes when I proposed to a stranger. The man who'd dropped his mask when it mattered most. The man who'd chosen me when he could have had anyone. We stood there watching the city lights. 2 people who found each other in the most unlikely way. A nurse who saw kindness in a beggar's eyes. A CEO who found love when he stopped hiding. And lived happily ever after. Not because fairy tales are real. But because sometimes when you choose love over status, compassion over cruelty, character over appearances, you get the ending you deserve. The one where the nurse and the billionaire build a life that matters. Together. The end. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say yes to the unexpected. To choose kindness when the world chooses cruelty. To see the person behind the appearance, the heart behind the circumstances. Love is not about perfection or wealth or status. It is about being seen, truly seen, and choosing to see in return. And maybe, just maybe, the person everyone tells you to avoid is exactly the person you need. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If it reached your heart, even just a little, do not leave without letting me know. A simple heart in the comments is enough. And if you want to feel more stories like this, stories about love that survives everything, courage that changes everything, and finding home in unexpected places, Make sure to subscribe to Dramora Stories. I personally curate and bring these journeys to life for you. Every story here is a reminder that you deserve to be chosen, to be seen, to be loved exactly as you are. And maybe that is true for you too.